Let's go ahead and get started on Design Thinking for Leaders Week 6 testing. All right, guys. Thanks for being here. All right, we're going to start with the recap, which means, Scott, you're in the hot seat. um, and we're going to recap our discussion last week on prototyping. And so, Scott, what is prototyping? And I know you're a design thinking consultant yourself. In various capacities. So you can pull from your experience as well as the discussion.
Windows, after the last update, started this new thing where the taskbar is covering all my bottom buttons and I can't get it to go away. It keeps coming back.
Yeah. Feel free, unless you have a lot of background noise, to leave yourself unmuted, because I do, as always, want you guys to be a part of the discussion. So,
Okay, sure. Yeah, so some way, depending on what form it's in, product, service, or in our case, uh, people, process change, implementing ideas into some tangible form. And that's so we can capture design concepts and test them on users. It's like a minimal viable product, except in this case, it's not a product that we're looking to sell. So we're looking to align the changes that we want to make with our team's visions and what culture we're trying to create or get away from, as the case may be.
yeah.
And so this is on an internal level. How are we prototyping what we think the future is going to look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And this could look like, workflows. It could look like maybe a section of a process manual gets rewritten. Um, it could be, a communication flow for, how to get something approved that gets improved. It could be a number of things that really don't have a tangible aspect like a product does, but it helps our teams uh, do the job they're hired to do in a more efficient way, so that they can focus on the vision, right? And focus on, yes.
And in fact, I would say, because I've been getting better at doing this, and I recently did it to very effectively. Is if we're going to present a proposal, like let's say we have a consultancy and we're proposing to get a contract for some longer form work, like 6 to 9 months. Um, Tell the story that way. Make the request for proposal document like a prototype. Like imagine what it would look like if this, and this. And you have to know enough about the company to know what departments you're talking about, maybe some individual people and their names and positions, or particular pain points some have struggled with, and what have exacerbated, what have contributed to helping them. And if you can kind of paint the picture of a story of a prototype in our proposal, that
Yeah.
goes a long way to helping leaders in another company that we don't already belong to visualize outcomes of, okay, I understand the process of what we're going to do here.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I find analogies work really well too. So if you can, maybe something totally unrelated to their business or the work at hand, but you can paint in their mind a picture of what is happening, say for instance, like in our Star Cups example, which we'll use again today. They really are unseen. Nobody knows they're there. So you may talk about them as um, someone that perhaps you're talking about a little kid on the playground who's shy and they're over in the corner and no one knows they exist, versus maybe the child that's boisterous and singing and dancing and everybody knows the child exists. And so maybe the analogy is, how can we bring Star Cups to the community in a way that it is seen and appreciated and, loved, like the little child who's, entertaining us or whatever. So analogies, that may not be the best analogy in the business world, but you get the point. Oftentimes if we can paint an analogy of, that expresses the feeling part, the spirit part of what's happening in the organization versus the spirit part, the feelings and the experience of what we perceive will happen with these changes, then they can relate it. They can, beyond the mental conceptual processing of it, understand it at a deeper level. And that's really what we want. And that helps us in the sales process, obviously. So why we prototype? Why is that important? And anyone can jump in here that's prototyped, because this is pretty universal, whether you're talking about as a leadership practice or with a product or service.
Well, I like one of the ideas that came up last week was slow it down so we can get it right. Because a lot of time there's a rush to a judgment, or somebody has a big idea that they're able to group think into having support that may not be the right idea. So slow
Yeah.
it down a beat, let people think about it, ask, is this really the case? And your question from week one, how can we? So if we apply that question to what we're proposing to do, where are there missing links? Is there a gap? Like, how do we get from here to there? Is that logical to believe that implementing this change will achieve this result?
Yeah. The how might we question never goes away. The how might we, with every cup, with every conversation, connect people in our community to, and whatever the embrace the enhance the human connection. That whole vision, problem, definition really should not go away through the whole process with leadership. So we sticking to our vision? Are we solving the problems we said were the issues? Are we playing in the boundaries of our defining creative playground fence? We are prototyping for all of those things, not just because we want to sell this XYZ to a customer. And how do we prototype? There was some key differences. I don't know if you caught those. Scott, from last week to this week, or from last week in prototyping, there were some key differences about prototyping.
Is that
Actually, just before
oh, go ahead.
Just before you get to that, Karen, there's another kind of realization that I've had recently about why we do it, and it's a little bit off the wall, but I've seen it work. So
I like off the wall.
So we've tried. We're not fully there yet, but we've tried to implement as a best practice to try to, even if it's extremely minimal, to basically build prototypes of anything before we say yes or no to anything. And a prototype can be a 1 hour activity or a 2 hour activity. It doesn't have to be a 6 month activity of at $500,000, right?
Right.
So what I've discovered since we've done that, and basically what my default answer now becomes is not yes or no, but show me how that would work, right? And that is sort of like the cue to build a prototype inside the organization. Well, the other interesting benefit that you get from it is the relatively frequently, the person that brings you the idea or the concept, or the group that bring you the idea or the concept, never get around to doing it. And so the point about that is that that tells you something in its own right, as in, like, somebody comes to you inside an organization and says, it would be awesome if we could do X or Y. And you say, okay, we'll spend a couple of hours showing me what that would look like. And then they don't. Then now you know that it's nothing really other than an idea, but there's no energy or passion behind that idea. So it has this interesting sort of useful way of kind of filtering things out. Yeah. Versus as a leader, when you don't even really understand something or know whether it's going to work or not, just saying no up front, it allows you to be able to empower people to bring stuff forward if they're prepared to put a couple of hours effort into doing so.
Yeah. And what I love about that is, employees are having ideas all the time, right? Mm-hmm. And they could drive a leader crazy trying to implement all those ideas, but you're giving them back the ownership, but you're also finding out what's really priority. Because what could have happened? They could have been frustrated at the copier doing something random, and that idea popped in their head, and that was going to solve their frustration, when really it was just getting through the stuff that they hate, spending time at the copier or whatever. Yeah. And by doing what you just suggested, they get beyond that frustration to really thinking about, is this useful and how would it work? And they figure, oh, it's not that important anymore. So you've saved yourself a lot of time. Yeah. But Scott, did you want to throw something else in here about how we prototype and how it's different for teams versus products and services?
Yeah, I think this plays right into his comment he just made, because one of the slides you had was on granting leadership, ownership, support, and accountability. And
Yeah,
perfect example of one reason why we do it, because this does not now fall on my plate to try to have to implement your idea that you thought was great and I'm half-hearted about. Just delegate the responsibility for doing that. And if we get into that practice with teams, one, we're going to flush out the things that weren't really viable and didn't take any of our investment of time and energy personally to do it as an individual. Secondly, they might find out on their own what things actually matter to the people involved at the core of doing this thing long term. So this goes
right.
beyond this week or this quarter. This is going to become something that's codified, and other people like you are going to be implementing it as you onboard new people. So that has a much higher percentage of likelihood to work out.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it made me think of something else too. Because the fence that we put around the playground, you know, what our constraints are, what our limited resources are, technologically, financial, or people, or whatever, those things are going to remain pretty the same for the most part on a team. And so the more we go through these iterations, the more of those things are going to come natural to us. We're not even gonna have to think about them. And so an idea might, you know, 6 months from now, after you've done this 2 quarters in a row and you've seen the progress that it's made towards your vision, you know, you could have employees that not even come to you. They could have had 5 ideas they didn't bring to you because they already know that it didn't stay in the fence of the playground, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, reiterating those things, especially when you're just beginning to implement design thinking for as a leadership practice, really kind of embeds that philosophy, those principles, those constraints into the employee's mind so that they don't even waste their time when they realize, you know what, we don't have the resources for this, or, you know, I'm going to save this for later. And that too may be a good point too. We don't want people throwing out every idea, but we do want them to perhaps save them, because timing is a key too with ideas, right? Um, what may have been a bad idea or not the right timing 6 months ago may be perfect timing right now. So keep track of them, but perhaps not spend a lot of brain power on them. I love I got one on Amazon. I really liked it. It's called Hatch, and it's a journal, which the journal that I mentioned designing, you guys, for design thinking, was going to implement some of their practices, but it's a journal for capturing ideas called Hatch. I don't forget who created it, but it even has a section in there about timing and you know, so you don't lose those good ideas that perhaps are just for not now. The other couple things that were on that slide that Scott just mentioned on how we prototype differently. One is we're going to have multiple ideas. You know, usually with a product or service, you're focused on one thing. You know, you have a product that you need to get out or improve. You have a service that you want to get out or improve. With the prototype for leadership, which we'll recap what we did with Star Cups last week a little bit more, we could have 2 or 3 prototypes going on at once. And we could have one employee doing one prototype and 2 employees doing another prototype, and so on and so forth. So, but the cool thing is, just like with Paul's example and also with what Scott reiterated, is that the leader maintains the ultimate responsibility and the ultimate approval, but they don't retain the bulk of the work like some leadership models may have in the past, that all the burden was on the employee or the leader to be the creative one, be the innovative one, be the one that solves all the problems. It now becomes a team effort, and it really works well in that way. So let me get back to my little screen is getting in my way today, but let me get back to my notes on this presentation. All right, so let's dig into testing now. So who would like to kick off the discussion on the definition of what testing is in the traditional sense, product and service?
Yeah, testing is like validation and verification of the whatever the product or the code that we are developing. So it is just
Yeah.
that.
Yep. So it's all about evaluating the prototype, having those users look at what you've prototyped and go, yes, no, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. It really comes down to the part of the guardrails we talked about, the viable, desirable, and feasible. You know, how does it play out in front of the user? Is it look like it's something they desire? It's about gathering feedback. This section is often repeated, which each of you already know. I like to think about this as round 2 of empathy, because it's really not give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's really, okay, here's what I thought I heard you say. Here's what I came up with. Does this really meet your need? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? What do you think's going to work for you? What's not? You know, one thing on the product side of things, you hear people developing products and they throw in 20 features and then they wonder why customers could care less, because those 20 features never get used because they didn't really meet the core need. It could have just been one small change that made the difference, but ego can definitely show up here. We've kind of talked about ego throughout, but we want to be cognizant at this testing phase because, you know, we've just put in a lot of work and we have a lot of pride in our work, and we're excited to bring it to the customer. But we want to make sure that this is more about them and their need and how they're perceiving what we've built or come up with versus my product and what I did and all the wonderful things about, you know, the prototype that I've put together. It's really more about not what did I do right, which is ego, but did I serve you in a way that was meaningful, right?
There's a few,
Yeah.
a couple of things I'd add on that, Karen, if that's okay. So one is this process of gathering feedback is actually kind of complicated. And it's complicated for a bunch of different reasons that are almost psychological in nature in many cases. And we've seen this with regard to our own products and services. So, for example, if you're going down the super cheap route in your prototype, then the benefit of that is you're going super cheap and you're iterating and you're not wasting money early on and you're finding out what users need. The downside of it is that that opens up a whole host of reasons why people might not like what you have that have got nothing to do with the core of the solution, right? It might be because it looks cheap, or it's got the wrong name, or it's got a, whatever, right? Or it's hand sketched and somebody can't read the handwriting or whatever, And so we did this when we were prototyping our product, Billion Minds, and we did like low fidelity videos, and people became obsessed over the quality of the video versus the content of the video, So that part of it is complicated. The other part of it that's complicated is just like a pure psychological thing. So we, in our product, but this could easily imply in a service or a team setting or something like that, people consume our product as a service, and I'm like the face of that. Right. And so people watch videos that are delivered by me and so on. And so initially, when we were getting feedback from our customers early on it, I was on those calls, and then very rapidly realized, well, I can't be on those calls, because if I'm on those calls, they don't want to look at the guy that is talking to them every day and tell them that they think X or Y or Z sucks. Right.
Yeah.
So I had to take myself away from that, so that we could get more honest and clear feedback from people, because nobody likes to look at somebody directly in the face and tell them that they suck. Right.
Yeah.
So there is that. So this whole business of collecting feedback, obviously it leans into skills of deep empathy and making people feel comfortable with the feedback they're giving. But it's also, to a certain extent, training them on the feedback that you want from them in the context of the thing that you're testing, and then being able to sort through that feedback in a way to sort through the stuff that is meaningful and relevant versus the stuff that is not a flaw of the idea, but a flaw of the prototype itself, right? The stuff that's the flaw in the idea, you really want to capture. The stuff that's the flaw in the prototype itself, well, that's about the design of the prototype.
Yeah.
So that's not, so you have to be able to do that stuff really, really well.
Yeah. And you know, that reminds me of a video I did. I called it the golden circle of design thinking. It mimicked Simon Sinek's Start with a Why.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember Simon Sinek's golden circle, there was the what you did, you sold computers. There was the how you did it, you know, sleek or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then there was the why you did it. And to me, those things in design thinking are that human aspect. The what is the physical, the how is the mental, the why is the spirit part of things. So to your point about videos, you know, the videos are crappy. This is a prototype, right? But did you talk to them about the prototype to see if it hit the heart of things, the why of things?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you recall or if it made any impact last week in the discussion about the open office, Scott. I don't remember if you got that conversation, but basically, you know, we talked about the open office probably would have never existed had they not focused on the physical, that everybody, you know, wanted to be able to communicate, wanted to be able to, you know, be with one another. If they really got down to the point of the why, which was trust and transparency, which has nothing to do with everybody sharing the same room, right? So if you can speak to them in the testing phase, not just about what's happening or how it's happening, but why it's happening, and ask the questions that get to the point of, is this resonating with the why? You know, if trust was the issue with your employees, does this process, whatever it looks like, and however we're making it happen, is it improving our level of trust with you, or whatever that why was? That's another distinction I think that could be different and may even be helpful in the product and service scenario as well. If we can really talk to the heart of what matters to them, they understand we can make better videos, or we can, you know, make something more effective as far as how it gets done. But is it answering the why part of things? All right. All right. What are you testing? It's not as simple and straightforward as you would think. You know, with a product or service, yes, we're going to show you this sketch, this app, this, you know, landing page, whatever the case may be. But when it comes to your team, there's more to it. You're not just showing them, hey, this is the new workflow, what do you think? It's more than that. You are not just testing what you actually hope to put out into the world. You're testing more than that. You're testing whether or not you understood the need. Did you fully understand the need of the users in the empathy phase? That's what you're testing, right? The product is just the outcome, but the product's useless if it didn't meet the need, right? That's what you're testing that. You're also testing the problem. Was it defined properly? Did we define the right problem in light of the user's needs? So, okay, they needed X, but did what we're delivering meet that? And I'll go through the Star Cups analogy in just a second to show you how what this looks like. And did we meet the need? Did we fully meet the need of the users with our prototype? Especially when you get to the why of things, trust or acceptance or inclusivity or whatever it is that your employees or your teammates are looking for, those aspects are multifaceted. So your prototype may end up taking care of one aspect, but it may neglect another, or what looks like trust to one person may mean something different to another. So you really want to make sure you met the need. And then you're also testing, did the playground safety stay intact? Did you maintain, you know, the human-centeredness of it, the physical, mental, spiritual? Did you maintain the guardrails, feasible, viable, desirable? Did you connect on as many levels as possible to the vision, to the, to the talents, to, your business partners, and was it manageable? Because, now that you have a prototype, you can really see, okay, is this manageable? I thought when we came up with the problem, we came up with the ideas that this was going to be manageable, but maybe as we begin to test it, it's no longer manageable. So you're testing a number of different things. Any thoughts or questions before I kind of dig back into the Star Cups example? All right, I'm going to take that as a no. So back to Star Cups, which was our local Starbucks that we kind of took away the global scale of it and took it down to a single coffee shop in our city. So we want to get back to our vision. In light of our vision, with every cup, with every conversation, with every community, we nurture the limitless possibility of connection. Now, after our empathy with our team at Star Cups, we understood and defined our problems as this, and this was our expanded how might we statement. With every cup, with every conversation, with every community, we nurture limitless possibilities of human connection. How might we, which these were our hypothetical problems, increase traffic, market for free, because we're just a mom and pop shop, and handle some miscellaneous repairs that are affecting the aesthetics to our customer, maybe the efficiency of our team. So tapping into the talents and passions of our team during the ideate and the prototype phase, we came up with 3 ideas that stayed within our creative playground that we had defined in our phase. And do you remember any of those, Scott?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
I'm kind of along for the ride right now.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, we talked about 3 hypothetical employees, Sally, Susan, and John. And Sally, and so, our vision was obviously we want to increase human connection over coffee and conversation. Sally was a barista and her husband was a police officer. And so Sally's idea was, there's a tension in the community between police and the community members. And so why don't we have these events called Coffee with a Cop? And so Sally was all excited about that because Sally's husband's a police officer and that is meaningful to her. And so Sally is in charge of coordinating that with the police department in the city, as well as community leaders and other people. Susie was another barista of Star Cups, and she was a mom, and she dropped her kids off every day, and then she came to work at the coffee shop, and she knew, because she was a mom and struggling with, dropping her little ones off at kindergarten now and what to do, and is she doing parenting right, and all these things, that was something that was on the heart of moms. Plus, they didn't know what to do now that they had their kids off in school. So Susie came up with the idea, why don't we take the older ladies from the nursing home that's a block away that are lonely and have decades of parenting experience and kind of create this little community of moms and grandmas at the coffee shop. And so that was her idea, right? And
as the dad of 2 teenagers, that sounds like a terrible idea.
well, that's part of testing, Scott. That's part of testing, right? And then John, he was our barista who's part-time, but he wants to be a handyman and have a YouTube channel, and he volunteered to do the repairs for no cost, as long as he could come in and film himself and make those repairs part of his YouTube channel. So that was 3 prototyping ideas that the 3 employees came up with that helped us with those things that we had defined as problems. And so in the testing of this, we're looking at all these things that I just went through. And what's going to happen is, and we'll talk about the differences in a minute, but they will begin to go out and prototype and and host these events. And the manager will still have that final approval, accountability, responsibility, obviously, because there may or may not be money involved. If Sally and Susie are making up flyers to pass out, that may be something that, the owner wants to control the brand, so she may be involved in that respect. But as you can see, those are 3 different prototypes happening simultaneously by the employees, but are things that they're passionate about, that involve their own life purpose, but also involve the purpose and the vision of the coffee shop. And so they're engaged in ways that they've never been engaged before. And so they can go out and test those ideas. Now, before we get into some of the key differences in the testing part, our biggest testing mistake is, which you might have guessed, it involves the ego, testing to confirm that we were right. If you're testing to confirm that you were right, that is your ego. You want to rather flip the switch back to the empathy to confirm that you're meeting the user's needs. So, as Sally and Susie and John, they go out and test these ideas and they do them, then it's the manager's responsibility as the leader in this design sprint or design project to go back and observe, ask the questions, be curious to the negative and positive reactions. Did this accomplish what we wanted it to accomplish? Now, obviously, we're not going to go from where we are to, the best coffee shop in town overnight, but by getting curious and in looking at these 3 events independently, we can begin to decide, is this something that's testing positive or negative? Is this something that's leading us towards our vision, or is this something that somehow is leading us away from our vision? And that's really one of the biggest mistakes is, worried about confirming that we're right versus worried about, did we meet the need? Did we progress ourselves in the direction that we wanted to go? Because
This sounds
sometimes,
like what you
yes,
talked in the Ideate week about like ideas competing, people not competing, because we could be competing against the good idea, because it's another idea is ours. So we could turn the tables and take turns arguing opposing ideas instead of trying to empathize with the ideas if it's personified.
yeah. The empathy, the empathy part, so much of this, we think it's a phase and you do this phase and it's independent and then you move on to the next phase. But when it is a leadership practice, and perhaps even it could be enhanced in the normal product and service as well, it doesn't necessarily, it's not as compact and linear as you would think. Those skills that you're using in phase 1 of empathy can be just as useful in ideate and prototype and test. The things that you used in define to kind of gather that playground fence around your thing, it doesn't go away after you've defined the problem. You still need to go back and check some of those things. So yeah, good point, Scott. I think the skills are more fluid than perhaps the process, if you're looking at it on a piece of paper, would indicate. So key differences, obviously, and we may have hit on some of these, but from our discussion before I kind of go through this list here, what do you see as the key differences in testing with product versus service versus using it as a leadership practice?
Well, I have a clarifying question that might actually lead me to an insight on that, I think. I'm going back to your how might we statement in this fictional example. So the how might we increase traffic, market for free, and deal with the miscellaneous repairs. The thing that I find interesting about that is that those are, and nothing wrong with it, but those are 3 quite different things And in the examples of the ideas that you gave, it, at least on the surface, it only sounded like one of them potentially addressed all three, which was the example of the person with the YouTube channel doing the repairs, right? In the sense that they do the repairs themselves might lead to increased traffic, and there's an element of co-marketing going on with regard to the YouTube channel. So you could see that happening in that example. So I was struck, just as I was sort of mentally modeling how you would be testing this, I was struck about, does it matter in a world where you're testing multiple prototypes and multiple prototypes are potentially part of the solution? Does it matter that you've got one of these ideas that prima facie right off the bat appears to address potentially all three, and other ones and the other examples do not? So that's the clarifying question really that I had, which is like, how do you think about it when you've got like these three potentially disconnected things, all of which theoretically might be addressed by a solution?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I would say it does not matter, because an important thing to remember, especially as a leader, say, okay, your vision is this high lofty, in every cup, every conversation, we're connecting people and the limitless possibility. But under that, we got goals. We want to make, X dollars in sales of coffee every year. We have profit margins we got to make. And my question to you, if you were the leader of Star Cups, would you care if we're connecting our vision and meeting our goals, how we got there?
Nope.
And would you care that Susie was working on one piece and Sally was working on another and John was working on another, and maybe on something else, even totally, they might be working together? No, we wouldn't care. What we care about is the vision happening. Are the goals that support the vision happening? That's the matter. And I guess on a deeper level, are our employees engaged? Are they having fun? Are they loving their job, coming to work every day a lot more by what they're getting to do? If the answers to all that is yes, which we'll talk about some of those here, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And we just picked, in our hypothetical situation, it could be different as you're working with an individual team. We just picked three problems that we felt were the biggest obstacles to our little team making its vision, right? So it could have been one thing, or it could have, perhaps the increasing traffic is the only thing we can think about, because we're in there every day and it's crickets, because no one's coming, no one knows we exist, right? So that's the leader's discretion, and I think that's where the leaders get to use their strengths versus having to deal with things perhaps that they are not the best suited for, in determining, okay, are we working on one thing, or are we working on three things? It really depends on the team dynamics and the leader, how you tackle that.
Well, I think that answer kind of hints at a difference in this type of setting, actually, because if you think about it, like the first two examples that you gave, with the older people and the cops, right?
Yeah.
There are some broad similarities between those two examples, in the sense that they're taking disparate groups and connecting those disparate groups together.
Right.
So in a team kind of setting where the thing itself you're creating is more fluid and isn't a product per se, you could then elevate that entire thing and say, okay, we're going to have a program to connect different groups with each other. We're identifying two potential groups, and what we're really testing is getting these disparate groups and connecting them in the context of a coffee shop going to be successful. And who those groups are, that's variable and flexible. And so you'd be able to do that really easily in those kinds of examples, versus where you're prototyping a product, for example.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point, because think about it. Sally and Susie in particular, since they're the ones working with groups, they're going to be really comfortable dealing with the moms or dealing with the cops, because that's their world, right? But once they nail it and they experience it and they get good at it, then, you know, the growth path for them is now they can go, okay, what other community groups in our community are not connecting that really need to connect? And so their individual growth path is on a trajectory up. The company's growth path is on a trajectory up as far as impact goes. I mean, there's a lot of benefits there, but I think that's an excellent point that you make. Here are some other key differences that I found, and there could be more. These just are what come up to the top, off the top of my head. Journey versus the destination. Product and service design in my zero experience is very destination driven, right? You have a product, you have a service, we want to nail it and move on, right? As a team, testing and prototyping, the whole process really is more about a journey. You know, say Sally and Susie launch their groups, and the first one, you know, we may not have very many people in attendance because they don't know yet. But we're not going to shut it down because we think it failed. We may try it 3, 4, 5, 6 months more to see if it begins to gain momentum, if we get better at how we market it, or if we get better about getting the word out. So it's more of a journey versus a destination when it comes to prototyping and testing in a team setting versus a product versus service. Obviously, we talked about this one already. You're testing multiple prototypes at once. Prototypes, this we just talked about with your point, Paul, are more fluid. And it's almost similar to a product life cycle, because we want to give the prototype and the testing time to gain momentum. Like I just mentioned, you know, the coffee with the cop may be a dud the first month. The second month or week that you do it, it may get a little bit better, and so on. So it's going to be more fluid, or it could be such a hit that you discover, oh my gosh, we don't have the capacity. You know, it's costing more than we originally thought it would, you know. So there are things that may shut it down fast. There may be, you know, that's where the leader really gets to use their wisdom and discernment, and their influence on what's working. Is this just getting a slow start, or is this, you know, taking a turn we didn't foresee, and so now we need to nix it? But all those things are make it a little more fluid than, say, your typical product or service.
Hey, Karen, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How would you describe the makeup of all the people that have attended your class so far, since you've had it running, in terms of already working inside a company versus a consultancy that works for companies?
Well, I would say everyone. Now, I haven't really dug into the list, because the list of people that I send out to every 2 weeks is, you know, 3 times more than what attends. So I haven't dug into the list, but I'd say for the regular attenders and the people that have been attending off and on throughout the whole process, they're mainly consultants.
Okay. The reason why I ask is because this particular testing discussion is definitely not hypothetical. This isn't just a practice we could do internally. This is also something we could use to propose consulting packages. I'll give you an example. I recently just turned one in that was elaborate, but so the company was a nationwide company, and they operate in like 12 different states, and they have a few different programs. So there's totally maybe 24, 25 different groups operating in the country in various regions and metro areas. So what we did is we took the smallest one of those, and it was like irreducibly complex, meaning it had enough of each component that all of them also had. So it was like it was like almost like a test subject of the organization at large. And we said, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's our assumptions. Here's our hypothesis. Here are the players, and here's how we're going to implement this change. And so it went beyond this testing of like, hey, do we want to do this? And it was like, yeah, we want to do this, but let's do it at the smallest possible level to see if it's something that can broaden and be used as a basis for the entire organization.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And, you know, I've had multiple conversations with people that says, you know, give me the unit of your business that you're thinking of cutting, give me 6 months with them and see if you still want to cut them.
Yeah.
Because it really can have that big of impact. And if you can start it with the best part of your organization or the worst part, see the effect on that extreme, and then you'll have a really good idea of what's going to happen overall in your organization.
Yeah, because what happened in that case, they were going to move into another state and replicate everything they had in this first state. And private equity decided, just at a top level, without any testing or investigation or whatsoever, they're like, no, we're not doing it. And it's like, well, why wouldn't you have like rolled out what we were talking about doing with the smallest other functioning unit to find out if that was a good idea? Can we model it and replicate it to the next region?
Ooh, private equity.
No, I know that's a whole other subject.
They really could use design thinking for leaders.
No,
but
they
anyway.
they care about one thing. What's our return on investment in 90 days?
Yeah, well, give me a little longer and I'll show you a much better return. But anyway, finally, I know we're about to be at the top of the hour. You're also testing business impact. You're testing more than just measuring the success of the coffee with the cop or the grandmas and mamas over coffee. They may or may not be successful, but what was the impact? What was the employee engagement? What was the employee growth? How did we grow more self-aware as a leader? How did our relationships grow? Obviously, upskilling, I'll share when I send out the replay, an upskilling infographic that I've put together. But there's so many things beyond whether our little events that we came up with or whatever changes that we made were a success or for failure. There was an impact, and that's probably even on a grander scale the impact we want to test for when we go back and reflect on these things.
Yeah, so what's that upskilling many soft skills? What's that?
Here, I'll try and bring it up here, and let me share real quick the screen, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about on the upskill. This is just a post on my blog, but this is the upskilling that occurs when you practice leading by design. The innovative vision that you created, step 1 that we did in week 1, you're developing storytelling skills, you're developing persuasion, you're developing mindset, focus, you're aligning the employee's purpose with the organizational goals, creativity. I mean, I won't read all of them, but in each phase that we go through, upskilling is going on, not only in the leader, but also in the employees. And so many of these upskills are in desperate need in our organizations these days. And so, HR departments are often, shotgunning their approach. Oh, let's send people to a creativity training, or let's send people to, a storytelling class, when in fact, through the power of design thinking, they can begin to improve all of these skills. Emotional intelligence.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the problem with some of those is they don't see the cross application of them. They're almost like islands that they don't use because they don't see the connection to what they're doing every day.
Yeah. And you may have been the one that shared or tagged me in a comment on a post about how leadership training and leadership gurus of the past have really dropped the ball because it doesn't have that application. You go and you learn about leadership for 3 days, but then you get back to your office and really you're up to your eyeballs in goals and employee problems and customer fires. And there's no connection between the two. I think it was you, because I said I was going to do a 21-day laws of leadership. But this is part of the reason for that. Design thinking not only embodies and teaches so many of these skills, and they get improved as we use design thinking quarter in and quarter out. But it's training encapsulated. It's, I shared a post this week about a fractional chief of staff job I've just began, and someone, and I didn't even remember that they were in my my postgraduate degree, but they said, "You're the only one I've known that's taken what you've learned and made a purpose of it." And I'm like, how sad is that? That people are out there chasing learning and there's no purpose to it. I'm
Yeah,
like, how
that's
wonderful.
one thing I try to do every Wednesday, and it's my most successful day. I get by far the most comments on Wednesdays of any of my other posts throughout the year. And it's always about taking somewhat simple things that you can observe, learn from, and apply it to something bigger that's productive and purposeful. And
Yeah.
it boggles my mind that people don't already think like that. Like I don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, especially there's so much out there now that you could learn and that you might be interested in learning, but if you can't translate it, if it doesn't turn out to be of any purpose in your day-to-day life, uh, it really is a waste of time in this busy and crazy world we live in. And so to me, in fact, I had done a webinar, Design Thinking, the only training program you'll need this year for your leaders, because I truly believe it, because it encompasses so many upskills. So,
I think we find, especially the last 10 years, every quote unquote system has been like an acronym of rules and pillars that people need to memorize how to implement and do. And I'm like, we don't learn by memorization, we learn by doing. Like we get
Yep.
involved, we see how it applies, discipline, practice, that's how we learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've said this once before, like listening is a skill, obviously, that shows up over and over again in the design thinking phases. You know, I knew in my 20s to listen and practice empathy, but I really sucked at it, quite frankly, even though I knew what to do. So it's something that when you begin to practice it and it begins to make an impact in your life, then you want to practice it more. Then you get better at it. And, you'll still have bad days and you'll suck at it. But that's why, to me, leadership is a practice. It's not something you are. It's something you show up every day and you have the opportunity to do good at it or not. It's kind of an intentional choice.
Agreed.
Are you ready to advance your design thinking skills as a leader? Be sure and follow me on LinkedIn so that you can engage further on my posts at the intersection of leading and design thinking. Or you can email me directly at Karen@designforinnovation.com. I'm also available for individual coaching. You can enroll in coaching to accelerate your implementation of Leading by Design with your team. And obviously, on a larger scale, my organizational services, be sure and consider bringing me into your organization to teach design thinking through speaking engagements, custom workshops, and consulting. Thank you so much for tuning in for Design Thinking for Leaders Week 6 testing. We'll have one more session together, the bonus materials, and I hope you'll come back in 2 weeks and join us then. Thanks and have a wonderful day. Be sure and like and subscribe.